From the beautiful city of Los Angeles, California, we bring you the Gimme Three podcast.
Welcome back, cinephiles, cinema lovers, movie appreciators, and our family and friends to the Gimme Three podcast, a series for cinephiles. We are your hosts. I'm Bella of Stratus, and I'm here today with Nicholas Ibarra. Nick, how are you doing today?
I am very excited for this episode. I just got in my car and I drove around my neighborhood at unreasonable speeds just in preparation.
I love it. Yeah. Gonna die heroic on the Fury Road.
Yeah, exactly. Or the furry road. One of the two.
Either one, can't go wrong. Yeah, so today with the upcoming release of the newest addition to George Miller's Mad Max universe with Furiosa, starring Anya Taylor-Joy and Chris Hemsworth, we're so excited to bring you guys a Mad Max themed episode today to get you excited before heading to the theaters this week. So I was kind of just reflecting on like Mad Max, having watched so many of these films for this episode. And I was just thinking about how crazy it is that the Mad Max franchise has now spanned over the course of like 45 years now. Started in 1979 with the original Mad Max and the trilogy continuing through the 80s. And then it made a huge comeback in 2015 with Mad Max Fury Road. And now we're in 2024 getting a prequel with Furiosa. And the franchise is potentially continuing past 2024 with an in-the-works Fury Road sequel, which is, as of now, titled Mad Max The Wasteland. But apparently the jury's still out on that one, so I guess we'll just have to wait and see what happens.
Yeah, we'll see. I mean, I have no idea how George Miller is. These movies are taxing to make, and I think he's 127 years old at this point. The thought of him making another one after this, God bless him. I hope he does, but
yeah, I mean, he'll be looking like Immortan Joe by the end of it. Yeah, it's pretty crazy. Speaking of crazy, the original concept for Mad Max actually has, I was looking into it, and actually has quite the morbid history. So George Miller drew inspiration for this film based on his experiences working in an emergency room as a medical doctor in Sydney. Obviously, in this line of work, he was exposed to a lot of really brutal injuries and even some fatalities. And I was reading that growing up, George Miller also recalled just seeing lots of car crashes, and he even lost 3 of his friends to accidents as a teenager, which is pretty devastating. So, yeah, there's a very dark kind of foundation for what built this thrilling action franchise. But it was in his residency in Sydney that he met Byron Kennedy, who was an amateur filmmaker at the time, and he went on to collaborate with George Miller and eventually their screenwriter James McCausland 8 years later to create what is now today Mad Max. Working with George Miller, James McCausland has said that when writing the dialogue for Mad Max, he was really inspired by Australian motorists during the 1973 oil crisis, specifically for the villain's dialogue, which honestly, we get way more of than even anything from Max in a lot of these movies.
Yeah.
But what's really interesting about this is it was the effects of this event that also kind of helped form the foundation for the concept of Mad Max. During this time, McCausland and Miller noticed people would get pretty crazy and maybe even violent trying to fill their tank when there were these like super long lines at the gas stations. And they noticed that like if anyone tried to cut the line, people would start going crazy on them, sometimes leading to violent outbreaks. So it was this idea that people would do virtually anything to get gas and like keep their vehicles in motion. And that was kind of like the main thesis that inspired them to eventually write Mad Max together.
George Miller said that there's a quote of him saying that during that 1973 oil shortage in Australia, he saw in a very peaceful and quiet city, which is Melbourne, which is generally, non-violent.
Yeah.
He said it took 10 days before the first shot was fired.
Oh my God. Wow.
And he thought, what would happen if 10 days became 10 years? And that's kind of like what sparked this whole insane franchise.
It's really cool. I mean, it's very interesting. It's so cool to have this be like the origin story for what is now considered one of the greatest, and as we can see, most anticipated action franchises today, with just how many people are lining up to see Furiosa and to see the story continue.
Yeah, and I think that's what kind of like, that's why it stands the test of time, is because it's rooted in real fears, real actionable stuff that has A, occurred in the world, and then B, you know, unfortunately, we kind of see it not really getting better. We can kind of see things look a little bleak. And sometimes when your mind just wanders to like, what's the end game here? This is, if you're a pessimist and a cynic, it's easy to get to the world of Mad Max, to these wastelands. So I think that's what like connects so much, but you know, as opposed to like, I know you're a Harry Potter fan, nothing against the Harry Potter films. I think they're great.
But, watch your mouth.
You know, but you know, like magic is like, oh, okay, you know, like it's magic, you know.
It's more blissful escapism than like dystopian escapism, for sure. Right. It's like the difference between like in middle school being a Harry Potter fan or like a Hunger Games fan. Like one is definitely a little bit more lighthearted than the other.
Definitely.
How was it revisiting this series? You'd seen all the films before, right?
I'd seen all the films before. I'd seen all of the films multiple times. In fact, not too long ago, I think it was like last year or a couple years ago, New Beverly Cinema. It's unfortunate they're not a sponsor for us, and they have a podcast already, just because I'm inevitably going to mention them on every single show. But it's just whatever. It's my home away from home. New Beverly Cinema did a Mad Max-a-thon.
Wow.
Where they ran through all 4 movies back to back to back. So that was the most complete Mad Max experience I got. In fact, I think they even played the Tina Turner video that was released for Beyond Thunderdome.
My God.
in between Road Warrior and Beyond Thunderdome. So you got the full total Mad Max experience with that. But awesome. But yeah, I love revisiting them because A, they're pedal to the metal. It's they're a total blast. But then B, there are those layers in all of these movies, less so in Beyond Thunderdome, which we're not talking about today. But you get those layers that you can kind of dissect and think about the world and where it was then in the late 70s or the 80s and where it is today.
Totally. It's an amazing like evolution over time. Yeah, so obviously this is the Gimme Three podcast, which means we've only selected 3 out of the 4 Mad Max films to talk about today. And yeah, you probably were thinking, oh, it's obvious they chose the original trilogy. No, sorry. Instead of Mad Max 3, we're going to be talking about Fury Road, of course. So I'm sorry to all our Tina Turner fans out there who are hoping for us to talk about Auntie Entity. Maybe next time.
Yeah, maybe we'll do a Tina Turner Gimme Three at some point and talk about it then. But
yeah,
it's hard to pick 3 and put in the one that is unanimously deemed the lesser of the Mad Max films.
Exactly. Our thought process was, of course, we had to choose the original, easy decision there. The sequel, Road Warrior, honestly might be one of the best in my opinion, just laying it out there. Beyond Thunderdome, I think we can all agree it's not the most memorable. Whereas Fury Road is just fucking incredible, and it's the film that's leading us up to Furiosa. So had to go with it. So yeah, without further ado, Nick, do you want to take us away with our first film of the day?
Yes, we're starting with Mad Max 1979, directed by George Miller, a truly independent film. This is, you know, what they call Ausploitation. George Miller takes us to Melbourne, Australia, or some nearby towns, back roads not too far from Melbourne. And we're in the not too distant future. I think it says a few years from now is like the opening super on the title, you know, as we open the film. And society is crumbling. The streets are run by these biker gangs, these vigilantes, and there is a uneasy sense of lawlessness about. There are cops, however, and one of them, the coolest one, the fastest one, the most badass cop of the bunch, is this cat Max. And Max and his partner get caught up in a dangerous, deadly rivalry with this gang of fuckers led by this dude, Toe Cutter. Man, that Toe Cutter, he is great.
I love the names in this universe.
So the insanity of this violent, lawless world leads to the loss of some people who are very close to Max. And all that takes its toll on Max, and he starts to fall.
I'm scared, Thief. You know why? That red circus out there. I'm beginning to enjoy it.
What is this, Bunny Week?
Look, any longer out on that road and I'm one of them, you know? A terminal crazy. Only I got a bronze badge to say I'm one of the good guys. You know what I'm trying to say?
He starts to fall into madness, if you will. Mad Max. The plot is thin, and it doesn't need to be thick. It's a revenge story, and it's an origin story. I don't think they were planning on making sequels of this, but the story, the foundation of the story, is something we've seen like 1,000 times. However, this movie stood out and still stands out because of Miller's style, his blend of bleak, horrifying realism and almost like cartoony stuff mixed in.
Like Looney Tunes.
Yeah, absolutely. So we'll get into some of the details, but Bella, what were your initial thoughts of Mad Max? Had you seen the OG before?
I had seen the OG before. I watched it for the first time during COVID. We did like a big Mad Max marathon because why not? And it was so much fun. But yeah, I agree with you. I think this first movie is a one of a kind. Like it's so different from the rest of the series. And I think it's just so cool to see where the whole concept was born and then how we go from this to Fury Road. It's a very dramatic evolution. That I think really like accentuates the world building aspect of this franchise because it just like really shows you how quickly the world destroyed itself and went into like complete chaos in this situation.
Absolutely. And it's always kind of happy accidents that sometimes they make for the most beautiful things in cinema and in the world. But originally this film was intended to take place contemporary time. Like George Miller did not anticipate, want it to be in the future when they sought out to make it. But because they had so little money, they were like, okay, we have to kind of shoot this. We can't get permits and stuff. We have to shoot this on the back roads, the abandoned roads. We have to shoot this in abandoned buildings on the outside of Melbourne. So just to kind of like lean into that, they're like, all right, well, let's say it takes place a little bit in the future because that'll help us like explain why we can't afford extras or why we can't shoot it on like the big busy like streets.
Decaying.
Absolutely. Yeah. So I thought that was great, but then, it ended up working in their favor and spawning many more films.
Totally. Yeah. Another thing that I immediately noticed about this movie is there's not really a lot of dialogue. And after watching it, I wanted to like learn more about that. And so I read that George Miller was really inspired by like the absurd stunt work and action films of Buster Keaton, who was honestly a batshit crazy stunt actor in the silent film era. If you've seen his stunts, like it's insane the stuff that he would do. So yeah, George Miller said he always envisioned Mad Max to be like a quote silent movie with sound. And I just really love this description of it because so much of the film is just like the car or motorcycle chases and explosions and gunfire and just crazy, crazy action all over the place. And the silence or like kind of lack of, there's not like unnecessary talking or dialogue in between. And I think that's like what makes all the crazy action sequences and like sound effects that much more intense. I also think it's like a very strong and also very bold choice for an action film to like solely focus on kind of the kinetic energy of it, because sometimes I think that can lead you to like, you know, like the audience may not really connect with the characters as much. But George Miller, I think, really helps us to connect to those characters more like through their actions and experiences. Like seeing Max with his wife and his son is just so heartwarming. They don't really interact that much, like in terms of like talking to each other, but like seeing them together, and then like when he sees what happens to them, he's just like utterly destroyed, and he doesn't even have to say anything. Your heart just like breaks and you want to immediately see him get his revenge. So that's like one aspect of this film, and then like honestly entire series that I think is so cool about it is like the action is enough.
Yeah, it's visual storytelling, and this is a visual medium.
Right.
So it is very impressive to watch how he strings these scenes together and how much storytelling he does with insert shots. And even in the later films, we'll get into the details, but sometimes that's how he laid out the whole film. He's just thinking about it first visually rather than thinking about it from a script standpoint. But you don't need dialogue for a lot of this stuff. It's like, it worked for decades in the silent film era, and it works for Mad Max.
Exactly. Like, what better genre than action to like do that type of film?
Right.
I think people sometimes just get lost in the sauce of it. They're like, okay, we got to like make all this crazy stuff going on like with the characters. And it's like, no, let's just give me the action, and I think it'll work.
And you mentioned the car chases and the car crashes, and they are
oh my God,
they are insane in this movie. I mean, they're insane in all of them, but what's a little bit nerve-wracking about watching this movie is they made this movie on a $400,000 budget.
Yeah.
It's very, very small. And they ended up getting a return of over $100 million. So
oh my God.
It was like, it is to this day one of the most successful independent films ever made. But
that's so cool.
But because they were doing it on such a budget, they did not have the opportunity to do a second take or a third take on some of these car crashes. So you're watching these car crashes and they are like brutal and violent, and like the cars just go, they go wherever they're going to go. And like, it's exhilarating to watch them because it's like their one chance to get them, and you're just like, oh my God. Like there's one shot where one of the stunt guys like falls off the motorcycle after getting hit, and it's in slow motion, and the motorcycle like continues to fall and it knocks him in the back of the head, and you're like, oh my God, is he alive? Oh Jesus Christ. It's like so good. They even use it in the opening montage of this Mad Max 2 because it was like such a great moment. It's like, all right, if that guy's gonna take a fucking header with a motorcycle, we got to use it twice in this series.
They loved that shot. Yeah, I could not stop that. That's one thing I love about this movie too. As like an old action movie, it's like I genuinely like can't not react to it when I'm watching it. I was yelling out loud like, oh my God, I hope they're okay. Like, is that guy still alive? His leg is probably broken at the very least. But yeah, shout out the stunt workers in this, or stunt actors in this movie. They are incredible. It's truly mind-blowing to see what they did without like CGI. Even just like the explosions, I'm like, that does not look safe, especially knowing like how low budget this film was.
Yeah. The other thing that is kind of funny to look at with this film is the score. I like parts of the score. Like I actually dig the saxophone, because it's kind of like classic cop tale, but you're in this futuristic world. So I dug the sax, but then there's like this epic version of the score that's in there also that just for me is just like does not hold up to the rest of the merits of the film. It feels very like temp track, and I'm like, dang, if only they just kept the sax or just gone no score for some of the like action scenes and just let like the action play it out, I think that would have been better.
Yeah.
But when you compare this score to the score of, say, Fury Road or even Mad Max 2, it's just like that is the biggest leap, I think, of the whole series, because
it's a massive upgrade.
There are parts of this score that are rough.
Yeah, and it almost seems like it never stops, too.
Yeah, right.
Like, in a way, I kind of, like, admire it just in terms of, like, making music. Because I'm like, wow, you created one long song for this whole movie.
Right.
But then, yeah, at times it's like, okay, yeah, silence in this moment could have been, like, a little bit more powerful than this kind of, like, kitschy 80s theme that's happening here. Right. But again, it's just like I feel like in a way it just adds to like the campiness of this movie.
Yeah, it's a little
because I do love how we get like, even though there's a lot of like serious horrible things happening in it, I do love how we get like George Miller's own kind of like dark humor throughout all of these movies as well.
And then the other thing that I noticed about this movie on this rewatch was there's a lot of implied violence and tease of violence, but we don't actually see that much, even though it feels like it's an incredibly violent film, just because like what the bad guys are, they are doing and are intending to do is so horrific. Like, for example, when they like, are chasing that couple down and they're, it's terrible. Like, thankfully, they don't show what they do to that girl and what they do to that guy, but like we see the aftermath and our brains can paint the picture of what happened in between them. And it's just like, oof, man.
It's horrible. Yeah.
It's horrible. But they do a lot. They do a good job of that, like of not really showing you the violence, even when, Max's wife and kid are mowed down by that fucking dastardly toe cutter. It's like we don't see it. Again, it's a $400,000 budget. They probably didn't show it because they couldn't afford to show it. But we see just like it's like a shot of the open road, and you see like the little baby toy and a little baby shoe like going. It's like, okay, that's all you need to show show that baby is
gone. Sorry, it's not funny, but
it's not funny. It's not funny, Bella.
I know. It's just so like devastating. I remember the first time I watched this movie, I was just like like gasping, just jaw dropped. I was like, no, they did not just do that.
That's Ausploitation.
I almost wish I could I wish I could rewatch it for the first time again, just because I was like so shocked about the whole thing. And it's just, it really rips your heart out because at that point, I think the last 30 minutes of this film are my favorite part. It's when it like, I feel like just really starts like ramping up, and it's just the last 30 minutes. It's like, there's virtually no dialogue. It's just like a silent rage revenge tour starring Mel Gibson and the Knight Rider goons. But yeah,
absolutely.
So this movie's a lot of fun. It's a great start to the franchise that I think just gets more and more exciting over time.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, it's a great film. It really is, and it's for the budget, and it just feels raw. It feels dirty, and there's a lot to love and be impressed by. Totally. Absolutely, great, incredible start to the franchise. All of the films that we will be discussing today, and Beyond Thunderdome, if you want to be a completist and check that out, all of the films are available currently on Max.
The year is 1981, and we are back with Mel Gibson in Mad Max 2, The Road Warrior. So after the release of Mad Max, the floodgates for directing opportunities opened to George Miller, including he even got an offer to direct First Blood, starring Sylvester Stallone, hot off the heels of Rocky III, which I thought was pretty funny.
Wow.
Would be very interested to see what a George Miller version of that movie would look like.
Definitely.
But of course, George Miller turned it down. He wanted to focus more on his own personal projects, including the novelization of Mad Max, which he was actually currently working on with author, screenwriter Terry Hayes. And this process is what inspired George Miller to eventually pursue a sequel to Mad Max, because they were already kind of exploring more of the world and the lore in this post-apocalyptic universe that he created. And of course, after the success of the first film, there was also already a lot of pressure and excitement for a potential follow-up film. So Mad Max 2, The Road Warrior, picks up 3 years after the events of the first film. All the kind of civilization and remnants of society that we glimpsed in the previous film now ceases to exist, including the MFP, which disappeared along with it. So the world is in complete anarchy. There are groups of survivors and gangs sprawled across the wastelands, constantly at odds with each other, fighting for fuel, and at this point, even just basic resources like food and clothes. And after the murder of his close friend and his entire family by that sinister and absolutely remorseless biker gang, Max Rakitansky has now gone rogue. He's out on the road with a modified pursuit special vehicle and his trusted dog. We're introduced to a new version of Max. He's no longer kind of the kind and calm family man that we're first introduced to in the first film, but he's now a hardened killing machine blinded by rage and pain on an endless quest for more and more fuel. But his lonesome trip through the wastelands is interrupted when he comes across a defenseless community of settlers stocked with a very large amount of fuel, who are at serious risk of being completely destroyed by a roving band of psychotic steampunk plunderers. In exchange for all the fuel he can carry, Max decides to make a deal to help the settlers make a run for it, to defend their people and their resources. This, for me, this is easily my, like, if I had to rank them, my second favorite Mad Max out of all 4 films. It has double the action of the first film. It introduces this like steampunk aesthetic that we've all come to love and associate with the franchise.
Mm-hmm.
And it like accelerates the world building, giving us like a much bigger look into what the wastelands and the world looks like at this point in the universe. I think it's also the film that feels closest to Fury Road, which also makes it like a lot of fun because it introduces just the total anarchy wasteland setting. And then it also has the similar motifs like the futuristic kind of junkyard costumes and the thrilling car chases with prisoners chained to the front of the vehicles. It's just
right.
It's fucking nuts.
It's fucking metal.
Yeah, it really is. So what are your thoughts on this film? How would you rank it, if I may ask?
Yeah, I'd probably put it second also. I think we probably have the same order.
Yeah.
But yeah, it's fucking metal, and it's balls to the wall, it's pedal to the metal. It's got comedy, and it's got all the visual storytelling elements that we talked about in the first one, but it's kind of, George Miller elevates it a little bit more, and he does a lot of like symbolism and subtleties with his visual storytelling in this one that I think make it stand out far above the first one, and definitely far above the third one. For instance, like, you know, the opening scene when he gets chased by the first bad members of that gang. Oh, and yeah. He's getting oil from that car, and he's using like random bins and tins to fill up the oil with oil. There's there's remnants of that person's blood there too. So he's like mixing the blood with oil. So it's like, that's morbid image and says a lot about, you know, the world that we're living in. That's a lot of world building right there. It's like blood and oil is what we're dealing with here. And then in addition to that, like, he's like taking the scraps of like what's been left on this rig, and you know, you can glean that some survivors have kind of left this rig because you've got a whole bunch of like furniture and like remnants of a past life, you know, just abandoned. But he's going through this stuff, and he like picks up this like pair of dice. Should I take this? And he throws it away. So it's kind of like him saying like, do I take a chance? You know, do I take a chance on opening my heart, or, you know, like doing something else with like a new group? Do I take a chance, or do I continue to be a wayward soul? And he tosses the dice. So a little visual storytelling, things like that kind of fly under the radar or just subtle nods, but, not immersed in the action sequences, but do a lot of character building. There's a lot of character building of Max in this film that involves no speaking whatsoever.
Actually, I read that Mel Gibson only has 16 lines of dialogue in the whole film, and 2 of them are "I only came for gasoline."
Right.
Which I was like, yeah, that about sums it up.
Right.
But I love that. I never really thought about those scenes or those moments that you're talking about, and I think that's so cool and spot on for Max's character. Another kind of like visual motif that I just remembered is like crows. I feel like there's so many shots throughout all the films of like the crows flying overhead and kind of just symbolizing like maybe even something like vulture. It makes me think of like vultures, like everyone's just out to survive. There's no rules anymore. There's like betrayal and like it's just crazy out there. Like it's honestly, it seems this whole universe is so terrifying to me. Yeah. Even though there is like a lot of humor in this movie as well.
Yeah, you kind of have to put humor in instances just because otherwise it would be so goddamn bleak and intense.
Yeah.
But yeah, you mentioned the vultures. It's like even the leader of this group, Papagallo, the leader of the good guys,
Okay, yes.
For the good guys. Papagallo, he gives this speech about him and his clan. They're people with dignity and they still have hope. We're human beings and you're out there with the garbage and you're just basically a scavenger.
What is it with you? Huh? What are you looking for? Come on, Max, everyone's looking for something. You happy out there, are you? Hey, wandering? One day blurring into another? You're a scavenger, Max. You're a maggot. Do you know that? You're living off the courts of the old world. Tell me your story, Max. Come on, tell me your story. What burned you out, huh? Kill one man too many? See too many people die? Lose some family? What's that? It's a lot of family. It make you something special, does it? Hey? Listen to me. You're the only one that's suffered. We've all been through it in here, but we haven't given up. We're still human beings with dignity. But you're out there with the garbage. You're nothing.
And I love that speech because it kind of gives like a moral ground for everything that we're seeing, and it makes you think like, okay, where would I be? Where would I fall if we were?
Yeah, what would I be?
Would I still have hope? Would I still be trying to like fight for what's right and trying to, do what's best for mankind? I think I would, but you could also see Max's perspective, and I like that he calls him like a scavenger and a vulture and stuff because, as you mentioned, like in those first moments of the film when he's out there scavenging, he gets out of his car twice looking for shit, and as soon as he gets out, you hear actually a bird scavenger like caw and call out.
Yeah,
and like it kind of like is labeling him as exactly that.
And it's so like in a way it's kind of devastating because it's so on the opposite spectrum of like who he was in the beginning.
Right.
You're just like, damn, look what this world did to this man. It's just awful. And but then it makes you root for him. He's kind of like,
you're
I don't know
rooting
exactly
for the good to come out back in.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, there's so many funny moments in this film though, now that I'm thinking about it. I also
the dog character is great.
The dog is so awesome. I was like, does it have a name? No, it's just dog.
Yeah,
of
dog.
course. Max doesn't have time for names.
Dog, get down here.
Yeah. Yeah, I love the dog. I love Bruce Spence's character, the gyro captain. I think he adds a great bit of humor to the whole thing, and he's just like he's like likable, I guess, honestly. Even though he's like kind of creepy, he's likable.
I mean, he's he's like a bit of a fuck up, but he's he's got like a flower and peace symbol over his heart. Like he is the opposite of Max. He has, not lost his hope either.
Right.
That's you're looking for endearing characters like that in a movie like this.
Yeah. I think one of the most out of pocket characters for me is the like feral kid.
Yeah. Right.
It's just such a funny addition to me in this movie. Like it's not that much. I don't know. Like it's just funny to me that no one bothered to like teach him how to speak. It's like, where did this kid come from? Like it's not, I don't know. It's just so many questions revolving around this kid with his like razor sharp boomerang blade and animal fur outfit. I mean, it's just hilarious.
They had time to tease his hair though.
Yeah, I'm like, they had time to do everything else but teach the kid how to speak. It's pretty sad. But I think it's a fun character at the same time, just to see his relationship with Max and like kind of I think it kind of triggers Max in a way of like thinking about how that would probably be the same. He would probably be the same age as his son if his son had survived, maybe a little bit older.
Yeah.
But I think it's like he's a very important character in terms of like Max's character.
Absolutely.
If that makes sense.
Yeah. And that kid gives a pretty damn good performance. Emil Minty is his name. He gives a pretty goddamn good performance, that kid. I
agree. Yeah. Like it's very touching to see him. Like his reaction when I love that scene when Max pulls out the like a music box that he found.
Right.
And he gives it to the kid. It's like, oh, okay, I see you. I know there's still some like good in your heart.
Yeah.
And the kid's reaction in that scene is great. He's a great actor for sure. I also love the costumes so much in this film. I think they're absolutely hilarious. Like it's so much just all leather, but then like very minimal clothing or coverage out in this like blazing desert sun. And it makes it kind of like erotic in a way sometimes, like especially Wes and the Golden Youth. I love that duo so much. But I was also like genuinely concerned about their skin and sunburns. It was like all I could think about when looking at Lord Humongous. But yeah, I love it.
I think George Miller's got a little bit of a kink fetish. I'm not saying it's fact. I don't want to put anything out there on the internet and just don't aggregate this. I have no way to prove it. But
I'm sure you're not the first to have talked about it though.
Yeah.
Yeah, it's very kinky in a way. It makes it a lot of fun and adds some humor to it, I think. Even like I love the steampunk kind of like junkyard aesthetic, and then like even the funky hairstyles. Like there's that one girl in the settler community who like looks like Cindy Lou Who from The Grinch for like no reason.
Right.
It's just like, okay, yeah, pop off. Like, you look great. I don't really know exactly what the point of it is, but I'm down,
Looks dope. That's the point.
Yeah, that's it. It just looks really cool. And like, it makes the villains' outfits are always like, I love how they're always just kind of like very out of pocket, weird, creepy. I love the villains in the Mad Max universe.
Yeah, they're scary. They're scary and like badass looking. Yeah, they're horrifying.
And they've always got like the craziest costume out of everyone, which I respect. Got to look good while doing it.
Yeah, so there's some two things that popped out on this rewatch that I just want to mention real quick.
Yeah,
was there's a scene where Max gets in a gnarly accident. He's attacked by the gang, and the Euro captain, Bruce Spence's character, picks him up in his little makeshift helicopter. And there's a single shot where it's just like on Max's face as he's lying down, getting carried back to camp. And you're you're going overhead. So you see below Max, like all the different little camps and all that stuff. And it really highlights how impressive like this production design is, because you get to see the full scale of the sets, and like you get to see the full scale of these background artists and all this stuff. So that was really awesome to just kind of like look at that and be like, man, they really built this fucking world out in the middle of Africa, you know?
Yeah. No, it's incredible. I love the setting, and that shot is incredible. It's so cool.
And then there's one scene where I was just like, oh my God, where Humongous is just screaming at the top of his lungs, talking about nobody gets out of here alive. They're torturing people. They're burning bodies. They're crucifying them. They're raping them. And he's just screaming like archaic poetry at the top of his lungs. And it's raining and there's fire. And it's just people getting crucified. I was like, this is fucking metal. This is unbelievable, scary shit.
It's horrifying.
And everybody else at the good camp's like, oh man, we gotta get the fuck out of here.
Yeah. I love their reactions. They're like what they're doing to them. And then it like cuts to them because that person like screams off camera and they're all just like, shit. Like stoic. No reaction.
Yeah. What can you do? Let's fix this rigging.
It's as bad as it gets.
GTFO.
Yeah.
Horrifying.
Yeah. I love I love the sets. They're so cool. I'm thinking about how like when they were like open the gate and then they reveal that it's just a school bus with like panels on it. I was
very
like,
creative.
That's
very
sick,
creative.
man.
Yeah,
that's so creative. Cool.
The one thing I want to mention before we move on is you mentioned Terry Hayes.
Yeah.
Who wrote the novelization of the original Mad Max and then helped write the screenplay for this.
Mm-hmm.
When they were talking about the novelization and talking about just kind of like the backstory, because there was no backstory when they made the first one. It was just like, they were just like, well, let's make a fucking movie.
Let's make a movie.
But when they were talking about the backstory of this, how did we get here?
Mm-hmm.
Terry Hayes talked about something that he did that was awful. He published a fake news story about a war breaking out in the Middle East over oil, and that caused like a big stir, and people were like calling the radio station and like asking what was going wrong, because people were all freaked out about the 1973 oil crisis. And this was like the late 70s, 1979, Saudi Arabia and Iran, where, you know, there's a whole crazy thing going on there. But so in the novelization, actually, that is the catalyst for this entire shit show plague. Is somebody put a fake war breaking out news story out on the radio, and it was a domino effect of chaos that caused this madness to occur. So I thought that was like funny that George Miller was like, oh yes, that's perfect. Like, let's do that. Like that is the definition of insanity. Everybody believes a fake news story and the world falls apart.
Hey, that's pretty scary, honestly.
It is. And it's even scarier now because you're like, hey, there's a lot of fake news stories that have get people fucking riled up. It's very
real.
Yeah, exactly.
It's very relevant today for sure.
Absolutely.
Damn, that's crazy.
So I want to check out this novelization now.
Me too.
Mad Max. I'm curious.
Mad Max 2, The Road Warrior. You guys can watch it on HBO Max right now. Definitely check it out. I'm excited to hear what you guys think of that one, especially with all the praise that we gave it today.
And that brings us to a break. Don't worry, my friends. We're going to be back to talk about Mad Max Fury Road. But while we take this break, you are going to hear from PGA producer, Gimme Three producer, and my wife, Sonja Mereu, as she's going to talk about a George Miller hidden gem. So stick around for that. You're not going to want to miss it. Here on the Gimme Three podcast.
Hello, I'm Sonja, and this is my Movie Minute. George Miller is famous for creating and directing the Mad Max movies, but he actually has an incredibly fun and diverse resume outside of that. which goes to show you definitely should not pigeonhole creative people. To go from Happy Feet to Fury Road to 3,000 Years of Longing is pretty awesome. He also directed my favorite segment of the Twilight Zone movie from 1983. His segment is the final of the 4 stories and is aptly titled Terror at 20,000 Feet. In it, John Lithgow, yes, that's pronounced go, not gow. I was once corrected by the man himself. In it, John Lithgow plays a man who's a genius when it comes to microchips, but has an extreme and debilitating fear of flying. Things start going horribly wrong on the plane, and the audience has to decide, is this really happening or is it in his head? If you haven't seen the Twilight Zone movie, it's really fun and also has some shocking production details. Feel free to Google them after this episode. I love Miller's segment the most because I totally identify with being on an airplane during turbulence and completely freaking out, then looking around and thinking, could my life end right now with this totally random group of weirdos and strangers? Or even worse, sometimes wondering, what if someone just goes insane and opens the exit door? Like they do so well on The Twilight Zone, the story poses the question of whether in the end the most monstrous ones are ourselves. Some of the effects don't hold up perfectly by today's standards, but it's still fun, creative, and scary. And what more could you ask for from George Miller?
All right, welcome back to the Gimme Three podcast, a series for cinephiles, my friends, and we're talking Mad Max ahead of the release of Furiosa. And thus far, we've talked about Mad Max. We've talked about Mad Max 2. We're skipping beyond Thunderdome for this one for reasons, and we are jumping right ahead to 2015, Mad Max Fury Road, again directed by George Miller. Mel Gibson is out. He's old, and he has gone into madness for real, in real life, so he's out. Tom Hardy is in.
Hell yeah.
Charlize Theron is in as Furiosa. Hugh Keys-Byrne, who played Toe Cutter in the original Mad Max, returns to the series, but this time as Immortan Joe. And then we have a great supporting cast, including Nicholas Hoult, Zoe Kravitz, and Riley Keough, just to name a few. And we have moved forward in time in our world, in our wasteland world here. And how many years, we don't really know. Gasoline, or guzzling, as they call it in this film, still sparse. But now water is scarce also. The land, this wasteland as we call it, is nothing but sand and salt. One evil bastard, Immortan Joe, has a monopoly on water and food and essentially everything that gives life. He has enslaved these women. He breeds them. He takes their milk and he takes their children as his soldiers. He is, in my opinion, the most horrifying and powerful villain that we have encountered in this series, and perhaps the most horrifying, powerful villain of that decade that was the 2010s. So as the film opens, Max is haunted by the lives that he could not save throughout his journeys and his survival. And he's captured by some of Immortan Joe's war boys. And shortly after that, this Immortan Joe, he sends out one of his great drivers, Furiosa, played by Charlize Theron, to go get more gasoline in their war rig. Unbeknownst to Joe, Furiosa has his prized maidens hidden in that war rig, and she's planning this grand escape to the green place, a place where we can assume that there's green. And we can assume that's all we know. And allegedly there's more women there too that aren't just being milked by Immortan Joe. Anyways, Joe and his entire army discover that Furiosa's going rogue. His entire army goes after her, which includes Max, who is being used as a blood bag for one of his war boys. They're just pulling blood so they can use some of his crazy blood for this bitch-ass war boy. And that is essentially the setup for this Fury Road film. which as I describe it, it sounds complicated, but it's told, as with the other films we discussed, almost entirely with visuals.
Mm-hmm.
The exposition is just so beautifully laid out because it feels non-existent, but it is there. And exactly the first 30 minutes of the film, exactly 30 minutes, one of the all-time great first acts ever produced, because it is just nonstop action. It starts with Max getting captured. They set up this war rig. They set up Furiosa and the Maidens. The world building is tremendous, and it's all done in breathless action. And at 30 minutes and a half, almost to the second, they do this fade out after they go into that crazy storm and shit's going nuts. And it's like, what a lovely day. You know, that scene?
Yeah.
Like that scene ends 30 minutes into the film, and you're like,
wow.
It's a breathless, crazy 30 minutes. But anyways, Bella, your thoughts on old Fury Road?
Oh, God, I love it. This movie leveled up the universe in a very unexpected way. Like, the colors are brighter than ever. The CGI is fucking awesome, in my opinion. And the cast is just incredible. I love this cast so much. Not everyone, I will admit. But I'm a huge fan of Tom Hardy and Charlize Theron, of course, but also I adore Nicholas Hoult. Like, I love him more than life. I think he's easily one of my top 5 favorite actors. I just think he's brilliant and hilarious. His range is undeniable. And I love his character so much in this film. I think Nux is a very big part of it. And he made for a very believable like young man who's brainwashed as a child to die for Immortan Joe. There's just so many layers in this film that are so fun to unpack. And I also, of course, I love how much more of like powerful women we get to see in this film.
Yeah, right. Yeah, the imagery, you know, we were talking about the imagery in Mad Max 2. I love some of the imagery that George Miller uses in this film. One shot in particular that I just like fell in love with the first time I saw it and never forgot it. But it's when Max kind of like comes to after that, getting caught in the storm, and everybody's kind of laid out, and he comes up on the war rig, and all of the women are there, and they're like washing off with the hose of water.
Yes.
And there's a shot. He like tell him, you know, come over here, give me some of that water. And there's a shot where we follow Splendid, who is very pregnant, and the camera pans with her, and she's holding the hose, and water is like spurting out of the hose, and it tilts down to the hose is spurting water, and it's just like her pregnant belly, and the fabric of her pregnant belly is just like stuck to her shirt. And I was just like, what a beautiful shot. What a beautiful way to depict that this is life. This is where hope is.
Yeah.
These women, this rig, you know, what an incredible, that's visual storytelling right there. You know, she didn't have to say it. We don't need to get some giant speech from, you know, Furiosa about why it's important to save this and that. We see it in an image.
Yeah, I totally agree. Like, it is incredible the way this is such a visual storytelling kind of film. I think I read that instead of like writing a script for this, they just created a storyboard first, which I think makes so much sense when you think about it.
3,400 storyboard frames were the script for this film, which in pre-production was like, awesome. This is great. We have all these storyboards. This is going to be banging, banging, banging. On set, in practice, apparently not having a script, shocker, was a bit of a fucking nightmare and a complete shit show. There are a lot of stories that the lack of script took its toll on the cast, especially Tom Hardy and Charlize Theron, because they're carrying the film. But because the filmmaking was so meticulous and Miller was under like such incredible pressure, according to them, he had a very hard time communicating sometimes what he wanted or what the final vision was going to be, again, with no script. So, you know, the thing, Bella, is sometimes with actors, understandably, if they don't feel comfortable or if they start to feel like there is a lack of vision and that they're going to look bad, they can get a little crabby. They can go off the rails. They can become nightmares to work with. Understandably, I get it. It's their faces that are going up there. So, anyways, Tom Hardy and Charlize Theron had by all accounts, a miserable time making this film, and they went at each other's throats. They did not get along on this movie.
Oh, really?
Yeah, they did not get along.
I wonder if that
they made amends.
helped
I think
in a way.
Yeah, I think it did.
I think you can really feel the tension between them very much. So that's really funny to hear that. It's like a thick tension.
Totally, and you get it. I mean, it's like, hey, it's like. Can you imagine? It's like dangerous stunts, extreme weather. Oh my God. Extreme weather, and no fucking script. It's like, I would be losing my mind too.
You're just sitting there like, what the fuck do I do? Yeah, that's brutal in a blazing sun.
Yeah.
Yeah, that's crazy. Well, somehow you'd almost never guess it just because, I don't know, this movie just flows so well for me.
Yeah.
And yeah, the visuals are stunning. I love the colors. I think, especially just like having it in the desert, they got to like having that setting. They got to play a lot with like the hues and tones of like orange and then blue and like all that, like from the sky and all that stuff.
Right.
And CGI wise, like that sandstorm with the lightning in it is so sick.
Yeah,
I love that scene. Yeah, the acting, I would say I love Tom Hardy in it. I think he did a really great kind of, like, I would not even really think twice about the fact that it's not Mel Gibson, honestly.
Yeah.
I think he did the character justice and it felt very like cohesive. And then like Charlize Theron is just, I love her so much. I think she's brilliant and her character is so fascinating. And I'm really excited we're getting Furiosa because you do. I forgot that you do get like a lot of background to her story in this film.
Yeah.
And so I'm very excited to like see that on the screen. I'm kind of nervous though as well because I'm like, this, in a way, the Furiosa story in this film is definitely going to be much more of a happy story than I think what we're going to get in Furiosa.
Yeah, you would think, right?
Yeah, just to like see
knowing
how
her
she
background
got into this mess.
Yeah.
Yeah, it's going to be brutal. But I'm also just excited to like get more of the lore of her like original tribe of women when we like get to meet them. I thought that was such an awesome scene of like just seeing where she came from and what she's trying to find, and it's a great kind of like exploration of identity in a way as well, where it's like she was taken when she was super young and she's like a grown woman now. It sounds like it's been like 20 years have passed pretty much since she's seen her family or anyone from her past. And you know, that scene when she learns that they already passed through the green place and it was like the swampy area with all the vultures and she just like releases that like guttural scream. Oh, kills me. I love that scene though. I think it's so powerful.
Yeah, Furiosa is kind of the real hero of this film. Max is, almost the supporting character. I know it's called Mad Max Fury Road, but I think I think he's kind of like the Trojan horse that George Miller uses to really tell this story about Furiosa and set up his Furiosa movie because she's the real hero. Max has an arc, but Furiosa's arc I think is a little bit more powerful and obviously she's just a little bit more of a moralist. She's got a better moral head on her shoulders. Max is, his head's
swiveling, his head's spinning.
Yeah,
he's gone.
He's mad.
He doesn't really know. He doesn't really know what's happening. Yeah, she is like the moralistic compass of this. And I think having like Max, I really like the phrase of Trojan horse. I think that's perfect. I think it makes it such a feminist film as well, where he's just like such a true ally to them in the end. And even the way that, he pulls up in the rig when they finally break into the Citadel at the end, and she's been stabbed, and he like pulls her out of the car, stands her up. He's like, "This is your moment, basically.
Yeah, right.
Like, I'm not going to let anyone else get in the way of it for you." And I think that's just such a beautiful, like, powerful feminist moment for this film as well.
And the final shot is very a powerful feminist shot, which is just like us, like looking up at Furiosa, torn, beaten to shit.
Yeah, she's been through it all,
and surrounded by all of these, pregnant women. It's like, wow, what a shot!
It's stunning.
Yeah,
it's immaculate. I love it so much. And then I love just, again, more of the world building we get in this, and like specifically in Immortan Joe's kind of realm that he's created. I think Immortan Joe is by far one of the scariest villains ever created. He is just so heartless and cruel, a master manipulator. I think it's really terrifying the way that he's created almost like a cult. Like, he's got this godlike status to kind of keep control over the people below him, essentially.
Mm-hmm.
And it's so terrifying the way that he's like he has everything he needs. He's got as much water as he wants, and he kind of holds it over everybody else. And so at this point, he's like solely driven by ego.
Yeah.
Because this whole like pursuit is basically motivated by ego and just like his desire for a legacy. He just wants the baby. He like doesn't even care about anyone else. And that to me is just so disturbing and like twisted. And then of course, like, the visualization of the character. I love that we get to see what he looks like without his armor, because you're like, oh shit, this dude is like actually on the brink of death, but he's created this godlike figure to keep everyone in check and like not let them come to the realization that they could just take him out and be good to go.
Right.
And so in a way, I feel like he kind of also like symbolizes the old world of like religion and just like power over people and persuasion and all that stuff. So I think I love him as a villain, but I hate him at the same time, because he's just so fucking disgusting and terrifying.
Yeah, he's so well written. He even says,
and
like,
how
at the
fun
beginning,
to have Toe Cutter. Oh, sorry, go ahead.
Oh yeah, what are you gonna say about Toe Cutter?
I was just gonna say, like, how fun to have the Toe Cutter actor come back to take on that role. I thought that was so fucking awesome.
But yeah, in the beginning of the film, when he's like giving the people the water, he says, like, I'm the one who's gonna bring this world from the ashes. I'm the one who's gonna save it. And it's like, that's what cult people say. That's what, certain people who are running for president have said. And it's like,
indeed,
that's the kind of shit that's like, all right, when they start saying that, like, I'm the only person that can save this world, it's scary. Walk away.
Yeah, it's not going to be good, that's for sure.
Walk away.
So yeah, I love how there's both such intensity but also humor in these films, and especially this one, because like, this movie is so ridiculous in a lot of ways.
Dude, the guy playing the guitar, like, when I saw that
Doof Warrior,
the first time I saw this movie, and there was like the guy playing the guitar on a top of a moving, warring vehicle. I was like, okay, 5 stars. Like,
honestly, though,
I don't care how this movie ends. It's 5 stars.
It's so good. It's so funny. I looked up I was on Letterboxd looking at the reviews, and Ayo Edebiri, who I love, has like a top review on there talking about how she used to date the guy who plays the Doof Warrior.
Oh, no kidding.
And she just talks about how, like, she's like, obviously everyone knows this movie's really hard for me to watch because of this guy who broke my heart. But she's like, what do you do when he's like slaying it on the guitar in Fury Road? So yeah, you guys should check it out on Letterboxd. It's a really funny, like, long ass review of her just like mulling over it, but basically being like, I still gave this movie 5 stars because it's just that good, even though I have this like terrible personal connection to it. Which I thought was hilarious. But yeah, between that and then also like one of my favorite parts of this film is like the War Boys and the way they're like, witness,
Oh, dude,
witness
it's so
me.
cool.
And then like one of them dies and they're like, mediocre.
Yeah. That is a line that I use frequently, is when Knox is like gonna go and like get the girls for Emotin Joe, and he's like, oh man, if you do this, I will personally take you to Valhalla, and he like sprays the chrome shit on his face. He's like, oh, he's crying. He's
Shiny
all
and
fucking
chrome.
Yeah. And he first step he takes, he trips and drops the gun. And Immortan Joe goes, mediocre. So I say mediocre like once a week whenever I encounter something mediocre.
I love it. That scene is so fucking funny. I love it so much because I just think Nux is such a funny character.
Yeah.
And to have that happen to it, like you see him try and try again. He's like, I just want to die on the Fury Road. That's like all he wants. And he can't even do that.
Right. He can't even have like you can't even commit suicide.
He can't even die.
Yeah.
He just keeps surviving. And that's what makes this character so great in like redemption as well, too.
Mm-hmm.
It's like he has that scene with I think her name is like Capable in it, played by Riley Keough. And he's just talking about how he's like, I don't even know what to do. Like, I have no sense of purpose. And that's where you really see how Immortan Joe has also created this like godlike persona for himself, where it's like, it makes Nux so brave to be able to like not just go against a leader, but go against his god.
Right.
Right. And like overcome that, having like his faith all shaken up. He's just like, I don't even know what I'm good for anymore, and I'm gonna die anyways. So I thought that was another really great scene for like character development of the War Boys.
Yeah, great character design. Different, like totally different character design from the second Mad Max film, but just as memorable and impressive.
It's a movie that I could rewatch over and over again, and I can't even explain how excited it got me about Furiosa. Like, I thought I was already excited. Now I'm like, opening night, I'm gonna be there.
I have seen of movies that have come out post 2010. I have seen this movie more than any other film. I have seen this movie probably about 20 times, no joke. I saw it like 3 times in the theater when it came out. I've seen it like I think I've seen this movie like 3 or 4 times at the New Beverly, just because they play it a lot there. And
I
then
need to go. Yeah.
Anytime it's on HBO, I just throw it on, and once you throw it on, you can't really turn it off. So
no, you can't. It's insane. Like, you're just instantly sucked in. Oh yeah, my biggest regret is not seeing this in theaters. So I'm hoping I'll get another opportunity, and that's why I'm like, I'm not missing Furiosa. I'm not gonna have regrets on that one in theaters.
Yeah, we'll see. Hopefully it's good.
I know. We'll see.
It's got some big shoes to follow up on here. Some big shoes to follow up on.
It really does.
I'm rooting for him.
I did see today that I think last night it had its showing at Cannes, and it got a 6-minute standing ovation. I don't know if that means anything.
That means that's not great.
But
the thing with the Cannes standing ovations, right?
No, what is it?
Okay, so every movie at Cannes gets a standing ovation, and 5 minutes is like the minimum. Like, you have to like.
Oh, really?
Indiana Jones 4 got a 5-minute standing ovation. That tells you anything. Or Indiana Jones 5, the one that just came out.
Yeah. The Dial of Time or whatever the bullshit it was.
So that one got a 5-minute standing ovation. So it's silly. I'm not saying.
Yeah. Do they have like a timer on there?
Long story short is, take a Cannes Film Festival standing ovation with a grain of salt, because it doesn't mean anything unless you get like, the 22-minute standing ovation that Pan's Labyrinth got. Then that's like, all right, wow.
It just seems so awkward to be standing there that long.
Oh, you're kidding. Can you imagine? Like, for me,
as the filmmaker,
I have the bladder of an infant. So
me too.
I would be like, fuck, how long are we going to be clapping here? I got to take a piss.
Yeah.
Could you imagine? Like after watching Killers of the Flower Moon, fucking 4 hours, and you're like standing there for 10 minutes applauding. It's like, I gotta shit.
I would cry. Yeah, I would cry. Just piss my pants. Fuck it. Oh, well, yeah, you guys definitely check out. Highly recommend watching this, especially give it a rewatch, especially if you're planning on going to see Furiosa. I think it's just a fun recap that will get you excited to get more of the story, more of the character, more of the history. So yeah, HBO Max, it's got all of them right now. Any final thoughts on that, Nick, before we wrap it up?
Nope. I think it's I think it's one of the, it not only did it make a lot of top lists of the year that it came out, but it rightfully made a lot of lists for best film or top 10 films of the decade. And I think it's warranted.
Yeah, well deserved for sure. Well, thank you so much for listening to our Mad Max episode today. We hope this inspires you guys to revisit the films, head to the theaters. We're so excited to see Furiosa and to hear all your guys' thoughts on it. Also, if you guys love the Gimme Three podcast and you want to support the show, you can subscribe to our Patreon. It's just $5 a month. We've got so many fun bonus episodes on there. We've got some like spoiler-free movie recommendations for each month, and we're going to even be dropping a special bonus episode of our reactions to Furiosa. So if you want to check that out, you can sign up by scrolling down to our episode description and clicking the link that says support the show. There's also a Patreon link in the episode description as well, so you could access that there. Let's say you guys don't want to or can't spend the $5 a month, but you still want to support the show. Downloading our episodes is a huge way to boost it. So on Spotify, you can subscribe to the Gimme Three podcast and just pre-download our episodes. Basically, you can do this by going to our page, clicking on the settings wheel below, and hitting that auto download episodes toggle. That way, you guys can also just listen to us anytime, anywhere, and it also supports the show a lot. So once again, thank you so much. We really, really appreciate all the support. You can also find us on Instagram at Gimme Three Podcast. That's GIMME spell out 3 podcast. Gimme Three Podcast. Yeah, let us know what you guys think of the Mad Max franchise and give us a follow while you're there. And again, stay tuned. We've got some upcoming polls on our Instagram stories in the future. We have two upcoming episodes, queer horror and Pixar. And we've already chose 5 films for both of them, but we want you guys to choose the 6th film that we watch. So stay tuned. We're going to be dropping a selection of films for you guys to choose from, and whichever has the most votes will be our winner. So I'm really excited to see what you guys pick. Next week, join us on the Gimme Three podcast for a special tribute episode to the late, great Roger Corman, who passed away earlier this month. We'll be discussing 3 films from his iconic filmography, and that's an episode you definitely won't want to miss. In other exciting news, we have a super cool new feature where you can actually text us. So if you wanted to contact us in another way, head to our show on Spotify and there's a link at the very top of our episode description. It says, send us a text. So you can click on that. It'll give you a little combination basically to send us anything. Let us know your thoughts on the podcast, individual episodes. And let us know if you guys have any like theme or movie recommendations. We would love to hear them. Yeah. All right, Nick, tell our listeners where they can find you on the socials.
You can find me at Letterboxd or on Letterboxd or in Letterboxd at Nicholas Ibarra and on Instagram at Nicholas Ibarra and on Twitter, also known as X, at Nicholas P. Ibarra. The P stands for poetic. That's nice.
And you guys can find me on Instagram at Portrait of a Cinephile, kind of like Portrait of a Lady on Fire, one of my favorites, or on Letterboxd at BF Stratus. Just B and then my last name, F Stratus. Anyways, thank you so much for joining us on the Gimme Three podcast today, and we'll see you guys at the movies.